So let's talk about the problem with Megyn Kelly. Right now, in general, we take a step back. We can understand that the right might be in power, but we are losing. We're actually repeating almost all the same mistakes of the left in the past 10 years. And a lot of it comes down to the same terrible combination, which is political opportunism being used as justification for moral cowardice. And for the same reason the left lost, we will too, which is we're too scared to call out our craziest voices. By the way, to be clear, any winning coalition is going to have crazy voices because crazy supporters are the side effect of a successful mass movement. And then they even make good volunteers for campaigns as long as you don't actually let them talk to voters. But where they become a problem is when they start dictating your message. And that's what's happening here. And that's what brings me to the problem with the right personified right now, which is Megyn Kelly. And you might be surprised to hear me say that. I could already hear people, really? Megyn, not Tucker, not Candace, but Megyn? Here's the thing. I don't expect any better of Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens. I mean, Tucker, he's become the right's version of Robin DiAngelo. And Candace has turned into our Jussie Smollett, only with yarmulkes instead of MAGA hats. I mean, their behavior is what you'd expect from a pathological narcissist who got her start, in Candace's case, as an influencer by threatening to dox children. They're not the problem because they can't be better. But Megyn can, and yet is choosing not to. And that is not only the problem with Megyn, but it is the problem with the right in general. And if you don't know me and you're watching this, it gives me no pleasure to say this. I have lost sleep over this. Megyn Kelly used to be my role model, and I wish she still were. I want her to be. But right now, the inescapable fact is that Megyn is leading the movement off a cliff because she's outright telling people not to think critically. At a recent Turning Point event, when she went to Virginia Tech the week following Charlie's death, which I applaud her for, of course, Megyn urged people listening to her to simply pick one or two non-mainstream voices to listen that offer bad news for their own side when she was asked who you can trust in media. And she didn't suggest a way to assess whether that bad news was even true. No. She said to outsource your thinking to a couple of occasionally contrarian influencers and trust them without a regular service check. So, where to start with all of this? First, while admissions against interest are sometimes a sign of honesty, they're not always. There is a big difference between bad news being your party's going to lose the midterms and your party is covering up Charlie Kirk being murdered by his own wife. Both are bad news, but only one is credible. And the bigger problem is that Megyn tells the audience to trust people offering bad news when clearly one is meant to help you live in reality and the other is meant to get you hooked on political mass psychosis. And I say this as an influencer myself. Influencers are not infallible. Far from it. The incentives for us, I would argue, are worse than for mainstream media. Because at least in mainstream media, your audience is guaranteed to some extent, your bills are paid to some extent, you have some reason to care about what's real rather than just what's viral. But it's very different in influencer spaces. Everyone here is vying for attention. And a lot of people don't care how they get it, as long as they get it. Do you want to demand answers to questions that are literally so stupid no one would usually ask them? Well, why not? You'll stand out just for asking them. Want to just outright lie to boost engagement? I mean, Churchill said a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth can get its pants on, and that was before the internet. Also now, if you get caught in a lie, you could just pretend you never said it. No one has the attention span to care or fact check you either way. And by the way, this is the reason why I never tell my audience to only listen to me. I always tell everybody should take information in, decide what to think about it on your own. The influence I want to have is the kind where my audience does not need me to constantly spoon feed them what to think because I've already helped them on how to think. But that seems to be, unfortunately, the opposite of Megyn's approach now. And part of this does track with the right's tendency to be seduced by a large follower count and name recognition, regardless of how they were earned. Just to be clear, you don't have to respect anyone just because they have more followers than you or because they have a lot of followers at all. You don't have to take them seriously. Let's take an example, okay? Kim Kardashian has 74 million followers on X. The Pope has under 19 million. Megyn is a practicing Catholic. Which of them should she take more seriously on matters of religion? I mean, it's very obvious here, and I know I'm giving an extreme example, and I'm not saying Megyn told you to follow Kim K over the Pope, but that's where she left the logic when she gave that statement. And it brings me to my second point, which is Megyn knows better than this, right? We know that when her business model isn't implicated, she has zero problems pushing back on widely followed people. Do you remember when she asked Trump that question at the first 2016 Republican debate? When she walked over to that decision desk on election night 2012 and she called out Karl Rove's wish casting that he was disguising as modeling? Do you remember that? When she spent 4 years defying wokeness in American media and culture. And by the way, to be clear, you don't have to agree with Megyn's decision to do any or all of these things. I know a lot of people in the MAGA movement were upset about her question in 2016 to Trump. But you can't ignore the pattern here, which is that she's not afraid to call bullshit on people. It's a huge part of her brand. To the point that she still said just this last week that there are no sacred cows, which is what makes her decision to support Tucker and Candace and others like them with silence, despite knowing that they're so clearly lying. It's so disappointing. And how do I know that she knows that they're clearly lying? This is simple. Because she won't actually admit to agreeing with them. She just offers increasingly absurd reasons not to push back. Let's look at the woman of no sacred cows suddenly saying she doesn't care if Tucker Carlson is an anti-Semite. She said that verbatim. She said, I don't care. I don't care if Tucker's an anti-Semite. And that going after the young mother, Candace Owens, is a bridge too far. I mean, does she not know what Candace's claims are? Maybe she doesn't know. She said she doesn't watch the shows. Okay, that's fair enough. But the Megyn I know never had a problem admitting when she doesn't know something. So why not say that instead of, at this point, essentially blindly defending a woman whose statements she is not familiar with? Why call her brilliant, which she said just last month on her podcast with the Fifth Column? Why call Candace Owens brilliant if you don't even know what she is saying? And for that matter, why be content with this ignorance at all? Because the Megyn Kelly that I know was never content with that. She pushed back on all things, research statements. She would show people epic compilations of their quotes to them. But for a woman who was always so careful and so unbending with her research, she is miraculously incurious about the things that Candace and Tucker say on their shows. Why? How could she not know, for example, that the young mother used her maternity leave to allow for the noted crackpot Ian Carroll to take over her show and claim that Turning Point USA killed Charlie, complete with evidence-free allegations that he was shot from a concealed trapdoor? I know Ian Carroll isn't Candace, sure, but he's not a young mother. And this is a big deal. This is who Candace chose to fill in for her during maternity leave. Why hasn't Megyn denounced that? I mean, we've seen her statements that she wants to do things out of spite, to just do the opposite of whatever people call on her to do, regardless of wisdom. But I don't want to believe that. The Megyn Kelly that I know took unpopular positions because she'd actually assessed the facts. She doesn't have knee-jerk petulant contrarianism. That's not Megyn Kelly. And this isn't about political correctness either. It's about teaching your audience to separate fact from fiction, which if Megyn really believes that we should be picking independent media personalities to follow, that should be the entirety of those people's job, right? It's not just being trustworthy, but more trustworthy than mainstream media. That's literally the whole reason independent media is supposed to exist. But now imagine for a moment that someone chose Megyn as one of their two news sources. If she's totally incurious about claims Charlie Kirk was shot from a non-existent trap door, what other hypotheses will she tell her audience to entertain? What other figures will she tell them to consider as potentially trustworthy? Will she applaud the genius of Andrew Tate? Will she encourage us to just ask questions about lizard people? And I say that because we're not that far from that. Those statements sound crazy, but they're not, right? There's so much evidence for the claims against Ian Carroll's claim. And Megyn's a lawyer. She knows how to pick these arguments apart. So why doesn't she? And at some point, ignorance becomes willful, and Megyn's ignorance becomes willful. And when that happens, we have a duty to ask why. Megyn Kelly is not a low IQ person. So why entertain this low IQ, resentful garbage? From Candace, it's literally all I'd expect. It's all I'd expect. But from Megyn Kelly, it's hard not to see a willful abdication of her best qualities. And now look, I can't know what's in Megyn's mind. Neither can you. We can't know what she's saying, why she's saying this, why she's doing these things. But I will say it looks like she's running cover for two pundits with large audiences because she doesn't want to lose their audience. She doesn't want to lose the love that she has now that she didn't have before. I mean, she's always had it. I've always had it for her. But she doesn't want to lose the audience that follows Candace and follows Tucker. That might not be it. It might not be it at all. And she might not even know why. It could be subconscious, truly. But either way, it's concerning. Megyn Kelly, up until very recently, was my role model. And the thing I know for certain is the woman I remember and I looked up to would never get so high on her own supply that she'd be willing to do just anything for a social media fix. But this is bigger than Megyn herself, which is why I am making this video. My third reason this is so concerning is because this has consequences not only for people listening to Megyn, but for the right-wing movement as a whole. So we're not going to mince words. I mean, we haven't this entire time, right? But we are currently staring down the barrel of a massive power vacuum when Trump leaves office. We are already confronting it right now in a barely smaller power vacuum with Charlie Kirk on. And the real question is who picks up the mic to lead the right going forward. And whoever picks up that mic has the chance to rival a president in terms of influence, if not also power. And part of what makes MAGA and the right so special is that it is not a movement that trusts blindly. We are not a herd of sheep following just a few voices off a cliff. Or at least we weren't. But if former voices of critical thinking like Megyn Kelly not only go silent in the face of the most cynical, exploitative, and dead-end ideas, but actually encourage her own listeners to outsource their thinking to those voices, then it may become just that. And that would be a disaster. We saw what happened when the left spent 4 years letting their bitter, low IQ peasantry write the party platform. The right should take one look at that and run far, far away. There are few people with the credibility to stop them in that course. And Megyn Kelly, for all her flaws, I would say very recent flaws, is still very much one of them. For those of us trying to preserve MAGA as the party of common sense and of truth and of patriotism, we need her in our camp. And we don't follow her just because she's pretty. We have plenty of hot people in this movement. No, we follow her because she's pretty and smart and isn't afraid to call out nonsense. That's why Americans vote Republican at all. Because at a certain point, they got sick of hearing lies detached from reality on the left. They're sick of copium and they want to self-improve. And Megyn can still self-improve. She can still be a voice of reason and of reality. And I hope she will be. I hope Megyn and all of the right are able to snap out of this uncritical love affair with crazy before it's too late. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.